Such beautiful bird song there for us across the ocean.
I'll mute it.
So welcome everyone to the second talk of our weekend intro retreat at Mountain Cloud. Gathering here in the Zoom Zendo across time zones and geographies gives us a taste of the real geography of this world. No separation, no near or far. The geography of the true human heart. No border, no boundary, nothing to impede anything. As the Heart Sutra puts it, this form is nothing but emptiness, exactly emptiness, empty of any fixed or enduring substance. The self with all its attributes does not exist in the way that we think it does. This is good news. The great freedom. What this tradition calls wisdom beyond wisdom. In the Heart Sutra, this wisdom is proclaimed by a figure of great compassion, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, practicing deep prajna paramita, wisdom beyond wisdom. Perceived the emptiness of all five constituents and overcame all suffering. If you're new to this practice, this central sutra, that's the first line. It's one that we recite in the Zendo almost every time we meet, certainly every session or retreat. These two wings, wisdom and compassion, make this world, and they make us who we are. There's an old English use of a word for when birds spread their wings and just catch the current of the air, and they can glide, fly for miles without moving a feather, just riding on the wind, these two wings. It's called stilling. These two wings of wisdom and compassion. Stilling. You could say stilling in our sitting. Springing from the Heart Sutra is another sutra about Koan, the bodhisattva of great compassion. You might have heard Kuan Yin or Kanzeon, the teacher of all Buddhas. In one translation, that sutra ends with the lines, moment by moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Really? Nothing but this. And it is enough. This. Most of us are keenly aware of the challenge of resting in nothing but this. Circumstances can so readily toss us about. And now, in our time, I mean, of course, throughout history, but now, here in the US, around the world, and personally, such challenging circumstances. We know the litany, the global pandemic, the death toll, the ongoing uncertainty, the injustice it has laid bare. I mean, here in the United States, but all around the world. Incredible. The protests, the violence, the social and political divisions, the urgent climate crisis, the anxieties and insecurities of daily life, the heightened time for practice. March 11th, 1 month ago today, was the 10-year anniversary of the earthquake and tsunami that caused massive death and destruction in Japan and triggered the nuclear meltdown in Fukushima. The cleanup is still going on, and it's expected to take decades. We don't really know. And meanwhile, radioactive waste continues to flow into the Pacific and to contaminate the area all around, now much of it uninhabitable. 10 years. So back in 2011, just months after the disaster, some 70, maybe 80 students gathered in Santa Fe, organized by Mountain Cloud, for the North American Sambo Zen session. Our Japanese abbot of Sambo Zen, Yamada Ryan Roshi, was greeted at that gathering as he arrived with an outpouring of concern. Are you okay? Your family, your business? What is life like there? Roshi was gracious and patient in responding to all of these concerns, talking about the situation and reassuring people. Then the next morning came his first teisho, his first talk. He thanked people for their expressions of concern and then said, "What are you practicing for? Why are you practicing?" What a wake-up call. What are you talking about? This is no dismissal. Death, destruction, life will never be the same. How will you face it? How can we take it in with open hearts? Nothing outside of this. This reality, and yet this. It calls to mind Dogen's instruction, the imperative that I cited yesterday. Love sitting in Zazen as if putting out a fire on top of your head. Love sitting in Zazen as if your life depends on it. Not only your life, the life of the whole world. This practice invites us to sit in the midst of it all. And right here, whole world sitting, to taste and embody that wisdom and compassion, freedom, equanimity, this innate, intrinsic equanimity right in the midst. More and more, as Zen takes root, deepens its roots in the West, there is this tendency, this inclination to say love, to call this practice an act of love. Or, as Dogen put it, intimacy with all things. So I'm aware that this is not only aware, really, so grateful for these opportunities. This is an intro retreat, and there's a wonderful spread of experience here. It's just remarkable to have newcomers plunge in and take this on, and then to have seasoned sitters join and offer support. So just a reminder, though, that I spoke about this yesterday, a Dharma talk, this Zen talk, our Teisho, is not a lecture. It's not to impart information. It's not to engage the discursive mind. The tradition calls it the presentation of the shout. However you hear that, even if it's just one word, that's fine. Otherwise, just let this wash over you. You never know. Years from now, something may bubble up and surface. So be at ease and be attentive. Today, as a pointer to this world of our own true home, I'd like to take up a koan from the Gateless Gate, or Mumonkan, this absolutely remarkable collection of 48 koans, and then some nice appendix at the end that was compiled by the great master Mumon. This is going to be case 48, the last case. The first case is the koan Mu that I mentioned yesterday, that many who come into koan study may begin with Mu and certainly sit with Mu for our whole lives. So Mu at the beginning, and here is the bookend, case 48. I'll read the case and we'll see if there's time. Mumon added some, for each case, there's some short commentary and a verse that he composed. We may touch on that, we'll see. But here is the case. Keep in mind that a koan, sometimes they sound like a little story or an exchange between a master and a monk. But it's not to be unpacked by our intellect. It's really a matter of experience, just to taste and see. Or as Henry has said, a koan is like an arrow pointed directly at your heart. Here is case 48. Kempo's one way. A monk asked Master Kempo in all earnestness. In a sutra it says, 10 directions Bhagavats, one way to the gate of nirvana. I wonder where the way is. Kempo lifted up his stick, drew a line, and said, "Here it is." Later, a monk asked Unman to give instruction about this. Unman held up his fan and said, "This fan jumps up to the 33rd heaven and hits the nose of the god residing there. The carp of the eastern sea leaps up." Some translations say, when a carp is struck in the eastern sea, it leaps up and a rain falls in torrents. Or another translation, it rains torrents as though a tray of water is overturned. That's the case, sort of these two parts to it. Kempo, and then his, for a time, his disciple, Unman, who became also a great, great master. So Kempo was a disciple of Tozan Ryokai, one of the founders of the Soto sect. We don't know so much about Kempo. Before going to Tozan, he studied for a time. Well, the tradition goes differently. I think the latest version I read, he's actually studied for a time with Unman. Sometimes you hear it the other way around. At any rate, they are, closely connected. They know one another. A monk comes to Kempo in all earnestness, open, unguarded, sincere, asking the fundamental question: what is the way? Where is the gate? Or what is awakening? Or maybe, what really is this life? Who am I? How can I realize the peace, freedom, and compassion this practice holds out? The monk comes quoting a line from the Surangama Sutra. 10 direction Bhagavats, one way to the gate of nirvana. So, sort of strange language. This Bhagavat is a Sanskrit word, a name of praise for Buddha or awakened nature. It has 6 meanings: freedom, prosperity, noble, name, auspice, highness. The sutra says, these Buddhas, these Bhagavats, but this is about you, your true nature. Each one of us is the whole of freedom. Each of us is rich beyond any means, so prosperous, noble, just as you are. Name, auspicious, highness. Each of us is the one body, what Dogen calls the true human body, extending out in these 10 directions. The sutra is saying, throughout time and space, all pervading, each and everything is Buddha, everywhere is the one straight way to nirvana. Nirvana is a name for complete awakening, absolute clarity, absolutely clear. You could say everything put to rest. But as this Heart Sutra tells us, there's nothing there. It's so clear. Nirvana. In terms of measure, this is the highest state of enlightenment, which is no other than the essential world, this world. As the Heart Sutra puts it, emptiness is no other than form. Every form, any form. So don't let the term nirvana throw you as if I'm just a beginner and here you are talking about total enlightenment. Kempo is saying it's here. And it's not something to have or attain, but it's what you are. Your native ground. Dogen calls this practice that we're doing, this sitting, the circle of the way. He writes, between aspiration, practice, awakening, and nirvana. Aspiration, just putting your feet on the path. Just asking that question. Aspiration, practice, awakening, nirvana. Everywhere, continuous practice is going on. Your whole body. Where is there the slightest gap? Yesterday, a lovely day of practice. Just after the close of the day, a student sent an email expressing gratitude and expressing this longing to experience intimacy with all things. Such a beautiful expression. Somehow, even if we don't, have any set of a sense about what that might be, it touches us. There's some recognition, intimacy with all things. So, as a postscript to this email, the student offered 3 questions, really core questions. Why do I feel separate? Who am I? What if I do not rely on thoughts to tell who I am? So I heard that as one question. Who am I if I do not rely on thoughts to tell who I am? Would I feel separate then? This relying on nothing. Such poignant questions and familiar. Who am I? If I drop all the constructs, all the stories, everything I think I know about who I am, what remains? Who am I then? And then also that first question. Why do I feel separate? Why? The Zen tradition has a lot to say to this. Human suffering is the first noble truth. The cause of suffering is the second. This Pali Sanskrit word dukkha, which gets translated as suffering, but it's really a sense of dislocation, dissatisfaction. The image of this wheel off its hub, this just things are not in alignment. The clearest way to point to that misalignment, that axle that's not, functioning as it's meant to, as it's made to, in its natural freedom. Why is that? Well, I want to X out that why, actually, and just offer this teaching that little I, oh, we know it so well. We hear this I, me, mine, this sense of I that we set up at the center of our experience as if everything revolves around that. No wonder the wheel can't turn. If only we could decenter that little I. But this question doesn't come from any logic, this heart of this question. Why do I feel separate? I'm absolutely sure the person who asked this knows everything I've just said, has heard this myriad times. Why do I feel separate? I have to confess that at the end of the day, this came into a whole heart. And it also triggered a memory of this kind of eccentric and rather wonderful character, a comedian from the early 90s, social critic, who called himself Professor Irwin Corey. Many of you, I don't know if you remember this or have never heard of it, but I actually looked up an old David Letterman show because it struck me, this memory. And, it was this old professor with the gray hair standing out. And he, in this particular episode, asks the question, or is asked, why are we here? And then he goes on this little rant. I'm just a humble professor. Philosophers and scientists for millennia have pondered the question, why? Who am I to answer? So, this professor says, let's just break this down. Let's just draw a line after the why. Just excise that. And then he said, go on to the next part. Are we here? Yes. You may not catch it. To me, this was just so funny. Forget the why. Leave that to the philosophers, the scientists, this endless question. Are we here? Yes. But are we? In his last talk, Henry talked about not knowing. And he, in this wonderful, loving, but kind of ironic way, said, we get to the point of sort of dropping everything we know and then trading that for something else. Like, now I know that I don't know. What if we drop it all? What if we really don't know? One way of asking is, are we here in the way we think we are? What is this? The koans often raise the question, why? This little hook. If you go into what's called Dogen, or the face-to-face interview with a teacher, and whatever the question, the first word out of your mouth is because, the bell will ring. End of session. Please go and sit with this. This is not a matter of logic. And yet it's the question we're all the time asking. Why? Why do I resist the very thing I want to do? Why am I tossed about by thoughts and emotions when I'm sitting here inviting stillness? Why all the suffering, the pain in my own life, the lack, the loss, the grief, and the pain of the whole world? Why? What have I done? What can I do? If only I could understand. I remember being a child, and even then facing something that seemed, challenging, or I really resisted doing it. And it was like, well, let's just think about it a little first. How often our why is a way of avoidance. I've mentioned this before, but there's a wonderful Danish philosopher, Soren Kierkegaard, and he has a whole collection of aphorisms. And one of them is about this endless diversion. He wrote, if we just think about the problems of the world hard enough, everything will be resolved by next Tuesday. Bless our hearts. Kierkegaard also wrote, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced, to taste, like tasting water and knowing for yourself if it's warm or cool. Yamada Koan Roshi has these lovely comments on this why. He writes, this why. It is the wonderful charm, the magical talisman which brings a Zen student to realization. This why is the miraculous means of putting away the why of reasoning with all its thoughts and ideas. And to pursue the why, he writes, you must surpass the why. I mean, that is a much, wiser and more thoughtful and more evocative way of this nutty professor saying, well, let's just cut out the why and leave that to the others. What is this? What might it mean to surpass the why? To drop all reasoning. That's what Yamada Koan Roshi exclaimed at his own deep, deep experience of this world. this empty, infinite world, this great, great freedom. He said, there's no reasoning at all. What would it be to fall into really don't know? What if I do not rely on thoughts to tell who I am? Would I feel separate then? What if we see through the stories, the explanations, the scaffolding? What if it falls? Or as Dogen said, falls away, drops away. When you drop everything, what remains? I wonder where the way is, asks the monk. Kempo lifts up his stick and shows him. Here it is. Here it is. Here is the way. Here is the gate. Here is your whole body in 10 directions. Here is your true self. All of you, without remain. What is he showing? And what about the 10 directions? It could be 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 directions. Here it is. Here it is. Each one of us. Here it is. Dogen has a chapter in the Shobogenzo, this treasury of the true Dharma I called 10 directions. And the first line is, a single fist, just this, is the 10 directions. A sincere heart, just one, is simply the 10 directions, crystal clear. The 10 directions squeeze out the marrow from the bone. That's his way of putting it. Wherever you turn, there it is. Really. Intimately you. A single gesture, a sincere heart, the marrow. This called to mind a story I'll just briefly share. I spoke yesterday about Bodhidharma a little bit, this ancestor who brought Zen or Chan or the sitting practice, this wall gazing practice from India to China. And, you know, the one who started all the trouble, Mumon says, near the end of his life, said to be 120 years old, Bodhidharma gathers 4 of his disciples and asks them to show their understanding. He has to, appoint his successors. He says, the time has come. Can you express your understanding? So one of the students named Daofu says, my present view is that we should neither be attached to letters nor be apart from letters. Letters being words, thoughts, neither attached nor apart, and to allow the way to function freely. Bodhidharma says, you have attained my skin. In other words, you are my skin. And then the nun, this known woman successor of Bodhidharma, Zongshi, she steps forward and says, my view is that it is like the joy of seeing Buddha's land just once and not again. Well, there is only once. Bodhidharma says, you have attained my flesh. You are my flesh. The next disciple says, the four great elements are originally empty and the five skandhas do not exist. Therefore, I see nothing to be attained. I mean, among all the entire range of mental and physical experience, all of this is empty. Whatever comes up, empty. Bodhidharma says, you have attained my bones. You are my bones. And finally, Huika, or Eka, this second ancestor, Chinese ancestor. He would become that. He steps forward, makes a full bow. Just a bow. Stands up and returns to his place. Bodhidharma says, you have attained my marrow. You are my marrow. So the record says he transmitted the robe and bowl, these emblems of the Dharma, to Huika, Eka. It's most touching to me, really most notable, that Eka, this second ancestor, the one who follows Bodhidharma, alone among all these ancestors, is recorded to have said, I beg you, Master, have mercy on all beings and teach me. He's the one who stands there outside the cave, stands in the snow as it happens, and begs for teaching on behalf of the whole world. Somehow he knows, I cannot awaken apart from the whole world. You're sitting is the whole world sitting, even if we don't see it. This is the Bodhisattva way, the Mahayana tradition, it's called. The inclination of our hearts for the liberation of all beings, and that I am none other than that. I wonder where the way is. Kempo shows his way. How might you show it? One way would be, what if I do not rely on thoughts to tell who I am? Would I feel separate? Taste that. And there's nothing outside it. Right there. An act of love, fully immersed. Of course, practice goes on endlessly. And yet, right where you are, just as you are, we think we need to drop, change, add, fix, already accomplished. This great clarity. We're sitting in it. We're expressing it. Offering it. Dogen says, Kempo's words, it's here, are the 10 directions. The world-honored ones, the Bhagavats, these Buddhas, that is this staff, this stick, this line. He says, the staff is, it's here. The one path, the 10 directions. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. So briefly, a monk later asked Unmon to give instruction about this. And Unmon holds up his fan and says, this wild verse, this wild commentary, this world that Kempo has shown in this. And then Unmon, this fan jumps up to the 33rd heaven and hits the nose of the God residing there. Such a topsy-turvy world. Where is that? This fan, this nose. Watch out, you'll get hit. The carp of the eastern sea leaps up and rain falls in torrents. Such a lively world. Free, dynamic, beyond interconnected. This unconditional, lively dynamism that cannot be divided. It cannot. Even our thought that it's separated is fully it. You can't fall out of it. You can't. Here it is. Fan, stick, carp, rain, sitting here, wondering, aching, trusting, beginning. Some commentators say about this koan that Kempo, drawing a line, takes everything away. Nothing at all. And Unmon, with his freewheeling activity, gives it all back. Computer, chair, microphone, sunlight. Late day across the pond. What across? What time? Here it is. Mamon's commentary we don't have time for, but he, in his wonderful irony, first of all is saying that both of these masters are presenting this world in total freedom. And neither knows where the way is. No knowing. How can we realize it? Release our grip on whatever we think we know. It's such a welcome invitation. Putting down the burden, allowing ourselves the great relief. That's one way of describing this sitting, this willingness to be still. That doesn't sound strong enough. The stillness that pervades, that we're immersed in, that includes everything I've just said, all of it. And at the same time, it is empty. Coming home. We say, entrust yourself to this moment. Nothing but this. Beyond any measure. It is enough. So thank you for listening, and thank you so much for this shared practice for the whole world.